Quick background for those who haven't been with us before for one of these panel awareness nights. I think this is about number 5 or 6 in the 20 years that I've been associated with the group. The purpose is to give all of us some insight into how different men have traveled through their prostate cancer journeys. Ultimately, we're hopeful that the outcome from the evening will be that all of us will come to know more about the experiences that different men have had, where they were, where they are, and what lies ahead for each. As you can understand, there is not time for the panelists to tell their whole story. So tonight will be little more than a snapshot in time that we hope will inform, enlighten, and inspire all of us. I do like to remind you of this because this is very important for all of us. Because we are not professional health service providers, we do not provide medical, mental health, or any other type of health service. No diagnosis, no treatment recommendations, or advice regarding any medical or mental health condition or illness can or will be offered. Therefore, when needed, we encourage that professional services be secured from licensed physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and other healthcare professionals. However, in a climate of mutual trust and respect, which is what I hope we are offering us tonight, what we can and we will do is encourage the sharing of our stories, our journeys, and our personal experiences, with the hope that together we can ease stress and make supportive and constructive connections with one another in an encouraging and positive atmosphere. As well, and this is very important, we respect confidentiality. Whatever is said here tonight stays here. So, with those thoughts in mind, because each of us is much more than having been diagnosed with prostate cancer, we've invited the speakers to provide some personal information about themselves beyond their prostate cancer lives so that we can come to know each of these gentlemen a little better. So, Ari, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our first speaker.
Bob used to live in Toronto, but one day he was drawn to the Northern Lights and moved to North Bay, where he now lives. He tells us that he's been happily married for 57 years with 2 sons and 3 amazing grandsons. As an avid golfer, he averages 125 rounds a year. He had a successful career in teaching, having taught in every grade from kindergarten to university, and currently that he's active on committees dealing with cancer and offering support wherever possible. I have to add that we received a follow-up email in which Bob corrected himself. He now tells us that he's been married for 56 years and not the 57 years he originally reported. I'll leave that change for us to draw our own conclusions. With great pleasure, I welcome Bob to our panel.
Thanks, Ari. Okay, starting in 1991, at the age of 50, I got my PSA test every year as part of my annual checkup. For many years, my PSA was steady in the 2.0 to 2.3 range. It started to rise slowly, but one year it jumped from 2.6 to 3.6, but it was still under the 4.0. It's not unusual for a jump in the PSA. My family doctor and I didn't think anything of it. The other critical check was the digital rectal examination, or the DRE. It's a physical examination of the prostate. My family doctor gently placed a lubricated gloved finger into the rectum to feel the prostate gland. Now, there are 2 lobes, and one is more difficult to reach than the other. Now, any man 50 years or older should have a PSA and a DRE. If there's a history of cancer in your family, the examination should start at 40. Looking back, I don't recall getting the DRE as part of my annual checkup every year. It was, off and on. In the fall of 2004, my PSA rose to 4.2, and my family doctor sent me to a urologist. Any PSA over 4 seemed to be the number used for referral at that time. My doctor said, "I'm pretty sure you don't have prostate cancer, but we should check it out." My urologist, Dr. Goldfarb in North Bay, performed a biopsy, and my Gleason score was 8. I was diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer in January of 2005. I recall my wife and I were shocked. I didn't hear much of what Dr. Goldfarb said during the rest of that appointment. I was in my 64th year. He gave us a book to read, and I was to return in 2 weeks. We left his office and we walked to the car. We agreed we had to let our sons know. We didn't know much. This is all new to us. When we got home, my wife and I called the Canadian Cancer Society information line. We spent about an hour assembling as much information as possible. Dr. Goldfarb said that I qualified for surgery, but he only performed a radical prostatectomy procedure. He said he would try to preserve the nerves around the prostate that are used for erection. I was referred to an oncologist for an alternative treatment option, and the oncologist said no to the surgery. He said that the cancer had already spread. What he suggested was 38 treatments of radiation, 3 years of hormones, and in 10 years, I'd be back for further treatment. A few days later, I attended a cancer support group meeting in North Bay to hear how various men handled their cancer diagnosis. That played an important part in my decision-making. It was suggested to me that I prepare questions to ask specialists, take someone to take notes. By the way, my wife has attended every appointment I've ever had. They didn't direct me as to what treatment I was to do. They gave me needed information and stressed that I had to be part of the decision-making on my treatment plan. Now, every step in my journey, I've relied heavily on the specialist suggestions, but I use the most accurate information I can find to confirm and agree with the plan. 2 weeks after my initial meeting with Dr. Goldfarb, I told him what the oncologist had said. Now, he was surprised how the oncologist knew that it had spread. He told me that it was an 80% likelihood that it had spread because the cancer was located at the apex and on the margins. He gave me some Casodex pills to slow down the cancer growth while I made my decision. I asked my family doctor to give me another referral. My wife and I went to Princess Margaret in Toronto for another consultation and met with the head of oncology, and she had 5 internists with her. She examined me, one of the interns examined me, and she asked a urologist down the hall to examine me. And we got into discussion, all in the space of an hour, I may add. And in the end, they said it didn't matter what the results would, the results would not be different if I did radiation or surgery. I did not qualify for any of the other options. My wife and I discussed at great length the side effects of both options and accepted the fact that I might likely lose sexual functioning. Now, to this day, I'm not sure what the oncologist said or the way he said it and how it affected my decision, but I chose the surgery route. I prepared for the surgery doing the Kegel exercises. On April 11th, 2005, my prostate was removed by radical prostatectomy. The urologist cut the urethra tube above the prostate and below the prostate and stretched the tube and stitched the ends together. My lymph glands were removed and nothing showed up as well. And as well, 2/3 of my seminal vesicles. A catheter was inserted connected to a bag to collect the urine. It stayed in for about 2 weeks. I could have had a smaller pack. This would allow me to go out shopping or whatever, but I didn't want to keep transferring it between the bag and the pack as I thought it might lead to infection. It turned out the nerves were not spared and erection was not possible naturally. And at the time, I was not aware that there were other options available. I had heard of incontinence and felt if I let the stitching of the urethra tube heal, there would not be a weakening at the joint. As a result, I don't know if it's because of whatever, but I did not have any incontinence. After 3 months, about 3 months after my surgery, my first PSA test came back and it was a 1.6. And so it was determined I still had some cancer. So I had an external beam radiation in the fall of 2005. Dr. Bowen, my oncologist in Sudbury, said we were going to target the prostate bed as there may be some cells left after the surgery. Now, I had 38 treatments with no side effects at that time. I was teaching at the university, so my wife and I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, drive an hour and a half to Sudbury, I get my treatment, and then return to North Bay. And then I proceed to the university for the rest of the day. Now, after 7 weeks, I had 3 remaining treatments and drove an hour and a half home. One possible side effect towards the end of the radiation, they say, is tiredness and fatigue. When I got home, my wife suggested I have a rest before driving to Ottawa. I wasn't tired, so my wife and I loaded the car, drove to Ottawa, which took about 5 hours. The next day, I did 6 hours of workshops, drove back to North Bay later that day. I did not suffer from fatigue. People react differently under many parts of the treatment regimen. Following the radiation, I had 3 undetectable PSA results over 9 months. But on the 4th test, my PSA level started to rise. In the spring of 2007, Dr. Bowen started me on hormone treatment to control the growth. I was injected in the stomach with a Zoladex needle every 6 months, and I took a daily pill of Casodex. Now, I suffered from hot flashes and enlarged breasts as the side effects. And in 2008, my PSA level started to rise again. Dr. Bowen and I decided to cut out the Casodex. It sometimes has a reverse effect, and my PSA returned to undetectable. In 2011, I stopped the hormones and have been undetectable since then, to this day. In the meantime, my testosterone levels for my age have returned to normal. In 2008, which is interesting, and 2.5 years after my external beam radiation, before supper on a Thursday evening, I recall it's Thursday evening, I urinated and the water in the toilet bowl turned dark red with blood and blood clots. After supper, the same result. So I went to emergency. The doctor said in emergency, well, that's an infection. And he gave me some pills. Now he said, if I have any difficulty urinating, I was returned to emergency. The next morning, I couldn't urinate, but I wrapped my penis with a warm cloth and I was able to urinate. After drinking lots of water and taking the pills, the dark blood and clots continued. The next morning, I had to use the cloth again. But later we went shopping that morning and had to go to the washroom. And this time when I urinated, it was bright red blood. So I decided I better go to emergency. They inserted a catheter and I was admitted to the hospital. And blood continued to clog the catheter. They changed the catheter 3 times to larger sizes to prevent the clogging. On Monday morning, about 7:30 a.m., Dr. Goldfarb appeared and he said, guess what? You have cystitis from the radiation 2.5 years before. And that he would see me at 11:30 a.m. in the operating room. He said by 6:30 the next morning, I could go home. I was still getting some blood the next morning, but I said I'd had it, I'd had enough, and told him to pull the catheter, and I was just leaving. I had to leave the hospital. I had a university class that morning at 11 a.m. and that day, and it was the first and only class in 16 years that I canceled. I was so dejected and worn out. I was exhausted. But by 5 o'clock that day, all bleeding stopped and hasn't returned as of today. So apparently the lining in the bladder, and this is 2.5 years after, was damaged during the radiation. I may never have it again. It may come and go. And apparently this happens in about 10% of radiation treatments. In 2016, Dr. Bowen said she did not have to see me again, and she transferred my monitoring to my family doctor. If and when it comes back, she said, we'll likely go back onto hormones. She also said that she thought I was doing better than she had ever expected. At this time, there's no cure. The cancer cells, once the cancer cells escape the capsule. I am excited about the results of clinical trials using PET scans and targeted radiation or viruses. In the meantime, there are things I think I can do to control the growth. I have implemented complementary therapy by developing a very healthy eating regimen and exercise. I had a dietitian check my nutrition program, and she thought it was great. I know there's a lot of controversy over the role of food, but eating healthy can't hurt, and I feel like I'm doing something to help my cancer. I get a PSA test every 6 months and a bone density test every 3 years. I call for my requisition, and I call a few days later for my results. I continue to volunteer for cancer causes wherever possible. I constantly try to gain as much knowledge about prostate cancer as possible. Any future decision will depend on my knowledge base. I don't recall ever doing something different than what my specialist recommended, but I know that if I felt there were other considerations, I would want to be prepared to bring them forward. I enjoy every day and appreciate the medical team that I have, and I want to thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you, Bob. That was a snapshot in time from a whole lot of years. When was your first diagnosis? Just remind me.
And it was actually, they took the PSA in I think December of 2004, and January the 18th, 2005 is when he said, "Oh, you know you have cancer." I said, "No." And he says, "Oh, and by the way, it's aggressive." And from that, I don't remember anything after that.
Okay, so it's a lot of years, and you had a nice succinct story to tell us with a lot of information. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity and invitation. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Solomon, if you would please unmute yourself, and if you would please turn on your video.
Okay.
So there you are. So let me introduce Solomon, who is our second speaker. Beyond prostate cancer, who is this man we see on our screen? Well, he's originally from Montreal, and he moved to Toronto with his family in 1998. He has 3 adult children. By trade, he's a practicing certified public accountant. That's a CPA. And here's something I'm sure sets him apart from many, from most, and maybe from all of us here tonight. He ran in the 1983 Montreal Marathon. But what I have to tell you that for me was the most aha or wild part of what Solomon wrote about that marathon was that he finished it. That's quite an accomplishment. Wonderful. And we're delighted to welcome Solomon to our panel. It's your turn, Solomon.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the introduction. My name's Solomon Mathlon. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2013. I was 51 years of age at the time and was in good health prior to my diagnosis. My family doctor had been checking my PSA every year since I had turned 40 because my father had his prostate removed in his early 60s. He's okay now, and he's 93 years of age. Therefore, there was clearly a history of prostate cancer in my family. Initially, my PSA in my early 40s was below 1.0. When I turned 47, my PSA started rising above 1.0, and by the time I was 50, it was a little over 2. Suddenly, at my next annual family doctor appointment, my PSA jumped to a bit over 6. At that point, I was referred to a urologist at Princess Margaret Hospital in Toronto, who advised me there was a need to do a biopsy on my prostate. The results were, of the 10 samples of the biopsy, all 10 samples had cancer. Also, my Gleason score was 9. The Gleason score provides a measure of aggressiveness of the cancer. The worst score you can get is 10, and I had a 9. The urologist at the time that I received my diagnosis said my prognosis may be very poor, depending on the results of the other tests that they would be doing. I then had a CT scan, a bone scan, and a couple of other tests. The results fortunately indicated that the cancer had not spread to my bones. However, the cancer had spread beyond the capsule of the prostate. This meant that having surgery to remove the prostate was not an option because the cancer had spread to areas beyond the prostate. I was very disappointed that the surgery was not an option. I knew of others who had been eligible for the surgery, and their prognosis after surgery was usually very good. I was then referred to a radiation oncologist at Princess Margaret. His name was Dr. Bristow, who really provided me with a lot of hope. He set up a radiation therapy for a period of 3 months, 1 month off, then a month break, and another month on. He also recommended hormone therapy that he said I would be taking for a 3-year period in pill form. Within 6 months of the radiation therapy and the start of the hormone therapy, my PSA was undetectable, which was great news. It seemed that I was responding well to the treatment. I was really elated. After the hormone therapy, 3 years later, in 2016, my PSA was still undetectable, and I was no longer on any treatment. My PSA remained undetectable for almost 4 years. I asked a couple of times when I was seeing the radiation oncologist during those 4 years if I was in remission, and I was told, not really. They would need to keep monitoring me every 6 months. In 2019, my PSA started rising again. And when it reached over 2.5 in late 2019, I again had a series of tests, including a CT scan, a bone scan, and now a PET scan, which is a little bit more detailed than a CT scan. The PET scan provides a lot more detail of the size and location of the prostate cancer cells. In January 2020, the test indicated that the prostate cancer had moved from the prostate area up to my abdomen. This is usually how prostate cancer begins to spread. It spreads upwards from the area of the prostate. At that point, before additional treatment, my PSA had risen to over 4.0. The prostate cancer had spread to several lymph nodes in my abdomen and a few lymph nodes around my lungs, as well as an additional lymph node near my neck. There were also 2 lymph nodes that had disease near my spine. At that point, given that the cancer had spread to a larger area of my body, radiation therapy was ruled out. My treatment plan was an injection of a drug called Zoladex, which is basically a slow-release pellet that they insert through a needle in my abdomen every 3 months. Zoladex is a man-made hormone that is used to treat prostate cancer and is at times used to treat breast cancer as well. Before I started the Zoladex treatment in January 2020, as my oncologist was leaving our appointment, he said that he was sorry. I didn't say anything at the time. After my first Zoladex injection in January 2020, by April 2020, my PSA had dropped to 0.8, so below 1, which was a big improvement. My radiation oncologist then added abiraterone, which is a pill, works by stopping the body from producing certain hormones, including testosterone. Also, prednisone, a steroid, was added in pill form. In June 2020, after taking 2 injections of Zoladex and 3 months of abiraterone, my PSA test reading was back to being undetectable, which was great news. I did ask my oncologist in April 2020, before starting the abiraterone, why he had told me that he was sorry when I saw him in January. He said it was because my life expectancy, now that the cancer had returned, was about 10 years. I was 58 at the time. That was tough to hear. A year later, in May 2021, the oncologist said that everyone is different, and whatever he says to patients regarding life expectancy could always be wrong, because everyone reacts differently to treatment. He said the abiraterone may work for 1 year or even up to 4 years. Everyone is different. Unfortunately, my PSA rose from undetectable in February 2021 to close to 1.0 in May 2021. Again, very recently. Again, I went through a number of tests, bone scan, CT scan, and I was told in May 2021 that although many of the lymph nodes no longer had disease in them, compared to January 2020, there were 2 stubborn lymph nodes next to my spine, right next to each other, that had grown in size over the past year and a half. A decision was made to have another round of radiation in June 2021, which were 5 radiation treatments, which I just completed. I have an appointment in early August to learn if the radiation took care of removing the disease in those 2 lymph nodes near my spine. When I did receive my initial diagnosis in 2013, I let my wife and children know, as well as a few close friends. They were all so supportive of what I was going through, and it was a huge help for me in terms of encouragement and the love that I received from my family and friends. I encourage those diagnosed with cancer to open up and let the people in their lives know they're important to you, and to let them know your diagnosis and provide them updates through your cancer journey. It makes a world of a difference to have support throughout the journey. Also, by reaching out to the Warriors group, who all have metastatic prostate cancer like me, was extremely helpful for support, as well as obtaining relevant and updated information about other treatments for metastatic prostate cancer. This really helped me to have a much better understanding of what my next steps could be in terms of treatment. The information provided by PCCN Warriors Group allowed me to better advocate for myself when meeting my oncologist. Nobody will advocate for you. You must take charge of your condition, educate yourself, and face the cancer head on. Also, I have decided to get a second opinion from Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York. PMH is a world-class cancer hospital in Toronto. However, I thought a second opinion of what treatment options Sloan Kettering could consider may be helpful. Of course, whatever I learned from the second opinion, I will share with PCCN. I thank you for giving me the time to communicate my cancer journey, and I hope it's helped some people that are listening out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomon. That was a very interesting talk, and there are a lot of similarities between yourself and myself. First of all, we're both CPAs. We both have fathers. This is very important what I'm about to say. We both had fathers that had prostate cancer. And even more importantly than that, we both got prostate cancer at a very early age. And there's something to learn from what you said about having support from family members, which is the same thing that I've had, and also advocating for yourself, because if you don't, that's the only way to make it through with a doctor. And thanks again. That was a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Anthony, AKA Tony. In addition to his immediate connection to and with prostate cancer, Tony is a managing partner at his investment office at Manulife Securities in Markham, Ontario. He's married with 2 children and is a strong supporter of community development and self-help initiatives, and in this regard, has worked on youth issues and social justice issues for many years. To connect him more directly to prostate cancer, he is currently first vice president of the Walnut Foundation. Prostate cancer is very dominant in Anthony's family. He is one of 4 family members with prostate cancer, and so he is very passionate about this issue. If you want to know more about the Walnut Foundation, just do a Google search and you'll be directed to its very informative website. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you. And thanks, guys, everybody, for sharing your stories. As you all have been saying, it's prostate cancer is not the same for everybody. A little bit about myself. I'm of African Jamaican ancestry. I was born in Jamaica, and I came to Canada at 15 years of age. Jamaica is very multicultural. It is predominantly African due to the slave trade, but there are also significant Chinese, Indian, and European ethnicities. This is important because prostate cancer is not as prevalent in the non-African Jamaican settlers, which is still a mystery for researchers and people like Dr. Vesprini at Sunnybrook Hospital, who are studying this fact. I have a significant family history of prostate cancer. My father was diagnosed at age 64, a late diagnosis. His cancer had escaped the prostate and metastasized, that is, it spread to other parts of the body. He died at 68. My dad had a family doctor who he saw regularly. He was a compliant patient. He had medical coverage through his work. and through our universal healthcare system, and yet his cancer was not caught until late. How was this possible? My father's GP did not believe in the PSA blood test as a diagnostic tool. In his view, the PSA test meant nothing because he had very active patients with high PSA readings, and they were fine. My father's ancestry did not factor into his thinking. His remark to me was that the PSA test was too expensive at $15 at that time. Of course, I did not at the time know what this expensive test was all about. The outcome, my father died at 68 from prostate cancer. The lessons and the outcome was that there was basically a low trust factor for medical professionals due to my dad's experience. I think it's important to know your own PSA numbers, help educate those who don't know, even if it is your medical advisors. We Afro patients are not all non-compliant, as the narrative goes. Because I knew my dad, and if he was told to spend $15 for a blood test that was not covered by OAP, he would pay the $15 and have the blood test. My brother and I embarked on regular PSA screenings after this experience. I began screening at age 40. My brother subsequently developed prostate cancer at age 57 and was treated. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer at age 54. An uncle who is a younger brother of my dad was also diagnosed and treated during this period. Screening does improve outcomes because if my brother and I did not learn from our dad's experience, we would not have known that there was a problem. There were no obvious signs of anything wrong with our health situation. Another thing I want to touch on is secrecy. We need to share our experiences. My uncle did not share with us that he was diagnosed and treated after our dad passed away. He only shared his information after I called him to let him know what was happening with me. He did not think of calling his nephews to say, get yourself checked, give your family history. And this is very important. My diagnosis. As I indicated previously, I started testing at age 40. Why did I do this? I wanted to get a baseline PSA reading and monitor from there. My baseline PSA reading started at 0.79 and gradually increased over the years, but sometimes declining. Overall increases were not dramatic, except for a mini scare in 2008. But that was later determined to be due to the fact that I had a digital exam at my doctor's office and then went upstairs to the lab immediately after to give blood for a PSA test. In this instance, my PSA reading had gone from 1.19 to 2.6, a change of 1.42 from the previous year. A retest a few weeks later showed a decline to 1.54. Fast forwarding to 2014 November, at an annual physical, my PSA had jumped to 4.41 from 2.61 the previous year. Based on this, I was referred to a urologist, and at the meeting with the doctor, it was decided that because of my family history, I would have a biopsy. The biopsy indicated that 2 of my 12 samples were positive with a Gleason score of 6. My immediate inclination was to opt for surgery, given my family history and our experience with my dad. Plus my experience of most everyone I knew who had been afflicted with prostate cancer. However, given the Gleason scores and a clean digital exam, my medical advisors recommended that I participate in an active surveillance monitoring program at one of the teaching hospitals in Toronto. my cancer was deemed to be non-aggressive. I had the benefit of drawing on the experience of the men in the Walnut Foundation, a men's health support group that I had joined a few years earlier, due in part to my family history. Most had opted for proactive treatments, and had done either surgery, brachytherapy, radiation, or some combination of those. The group was also bringing in expert speakers in the field, and was also connecting us with groups like PCS Toronto, where men were sharing their experiences or connecting us with support organizations like Expert Angle offered by what was then Prostate Cancer Canada. At the time, I only knew one person who was on active surveillance. Needless to say, there was a lot of discomfort and consternation to the idea of active surveillance in my family, given our family experience. There was a lot of raised eyebrows about this recommendation. In fact, there was a blur of opinions, of course, all well-intentioned, and they varied from, you don't need your prostate, get rid of it. You're not your dad, his cancer was his cancer. Your cancer is yours. You're making a mistake. Active surveillance is not for Black men. Or variety of cancer is too aggressive. Don't let them study you. The invocations of Tuskegee and how in that experiment, treatment was held away from Black men to see what the natural outcome would be for untreated syphilis. I took a step back, some deep breaths, a lot of reviewing materials and that, but then I made my decision. I decided to defer treatment and participate in the 2-year study. The study objective was to see if MRIs could be a substitute for biopsies and investigating how MRIs could be better utilized in assisting with low-grade prostate cancer management. It involved more frequent PSA and digital exams, biopsies when necessary, MRI-guided biopsies, as well as regular updates with the urological oncologist. That program ran for 2 years, and at the end of the study, it was recommended that I continue on that path, while also giving me the option to do more intervention if and when necessary. In terms of my current situation, I am still on active surveillance, 6 years and counting now. Basically, I'm doing regular monitoring every 6 months, PSA testing, digital exams, and a meeting with the specialist to review my scans and test results. For me, this is like constant learning in forums like these, plus opportunities to share my experience and to learn from others, like this great group here tonight. The approach for now is to follow the science and see where it leads me as it relates to my overall health. Of course, anxiety cannot be overlooked for this path because you're constantly being subjected to tests, PSA rising, PSA falling, routine testing, having to answer questions about your health, time off from work, etc., etc. Luckily, I have a solid wife who is my partner in life, kids and extended family, and community who support my decision, and super extended support system of support groups such as PCS Toronto, the Men of the Walnut Foundation, and my close friends who have been very helpful in bringing new information and expert opinions on prostate cancer care and disease management to me. So that's basically where things stand right now. Thank you for organizing this session. Thank the gentleman here who spoke earlier, and to everybody for participating in this. I think this is critical, this kind of a forum, so we can talk and share experiences. And yes, we all need to advocate for ourselves. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Tony. We saw another recurring theme with you again about family history and the importance of family history, your intimate thoughts about secrecy and amongst family members and not revealing potentially that a prostate cancer diagnosis has been there and we don't know about it. So important. And also the fact that you're going for regular monitoring, which is probably the most important of all.
Thank you.
Tony has just talked about his choice of an active surveillance monitoring program for his current treatment. I'd like to welcome and introduce you to Bob Allen from the Burlington Group, who's going to tell us a little about a newly formed support group for those who have selected active surveillance as their first treatment choice. Bob, could you please unmute yourself and carry on?
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Tony, for that talk. And that was extremely important for me to follow up with that, because I have to ask Tony what the side effects were from his treatment. And he hasn't had any side effects. He hasn't had radiation. He hasn't had radical prostatectomy. And so when I ask why active surveillance, that's the why. We know that only 50% of men who are diagnosed with low risk prostate cancer require treatment. The other half don't require treatment. It's low risk indolent disease that'll never cause a problem. The problem is we don't know who's who. So the active surveillance program was created to give time and space for those people to sort themselves out and find out who's who. This has become so important because the side effects from surgery and radiation can be quite life altering, and also drain on the medical system. So we have organized a national active surveillance support group from coast to coast. We started on May 13th of this year, and we meet every the second Thursday of the month. So I think it's the I don't have a calendar here. Whatever the second Thursday is of August. I think it's the 12th. Anyhow, it's on the website, which is prostatecancersupportcanada.ca, and all the national activities are there, and the local activities too, on calendars and so on. So I urge you that if you're a low risk case, if you've got a PSA of, or a Gleason rather, of 6, or even a 3+4, or 7, to consider active surveillance. A lot of the medical community is actually quite quickly responding in Canada. They responded much faster in the US, but we're finding now that you'll find some urologists will not be in favor of active surveillance. And there may be particular reasons why in your particular case. But as you can see from the experience of Tony, he's had 6 years now without any side effects. If he had had radiation or surgery, and that's okay if you need it, then he would have had side effects that many of you are familiar with. So that's why active surveillance, and that's what we're doing about it, is we're trying to publicize this across the country and get people on active surveillance talking to each other, because there's all new technologies that are evolving to support the active surveillance people because of the need for biopsies repeatedly. It used to be every year. Now it's mostly every 3 years. but we're getting more and more interest in transperineal biopsy that's less risky and more efficacious than the transrectal biopsies that we're all familiar with. There's imaging modalities that are coming to fore that will help a person who is considering active surveillance kind of guide his path. And another thing, of course, is genetics. Genetics have become a very big player in this, getting genomics and genetics done, which is getting much more affordable than it used to be. It used to be thousands of dollars. Now it's a few hundred. And that's an excellent way to start your active surveillance journey with these kinds of tests. And that's about all I have to say about that we're having a meeting. I wanted to let people know that it's, I think it's August the 12th. Harry, did you get is that the second Thursday?
So
I thought you had a calendar there. Well, I'd like to be able to tell you the date, but to be sure.
August 12th. Yes.
Yeah, it is
August
August.
12th.
It is August 12th. Okay, so August the 12th at 7:30. And Phil Siegel and I are both moderating. We hope to see those who are in a qualify for that to show up and learn about it. And even the leaders in the various groups who don't know about it want to know more about it so they can tell their groups about active surveillance. Would be important for them to attend that as well.
Right. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
And we wish you well with that new initiative. It's very important. And so we're very hopeful that you'll get lots of support and move forward with it. So thanks for being with us and sharing that with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
As we continue to discover that we're all very different beyond prostate cancer, I'd like to introduce Jeff, our fourth panelist. So if I can get rid of my face on the screen, let's have a look at Jeff.
That's wrong.
So
Hello, hi, Ron. Maybe
there you are, Jeff. So
getting me to speak. I'll show up.
yeah, thank you. So just before you speak, Jeff, I'd just like to share with everybody a little bit about you. Okay, so everybody's so different, and it's so interesting to read these different mini bios. Jeff continues to play hockey with two different groups. One's indoor that goes all year and another's outdoor. There are no goalies or refs. It's just shinny hockey. He has built 2 kayaks from a stitch and glue kit using 4mm mahogany plywood. And just this week, he's completing a repair on one of the storage hatches in which he and his wife are going to take the kayaks to Vancouver Island with the plan to paddle at every campsite along the way. As well, Jeff has experienced multiple whitewater canoe trips into Canada's north. He says that being on the lake early in the morning and paddling through a quiet marsh to sit with bird sounds is his idea of a great start to the day. Currently, he's navigating the first stage of retirement, assisting at a food bank, and planning a 2-month car camping trip to Vancouver Island while he and his wife wait for the new normal of post-COVID travel. Most interesting, Jeff. And now to your story. Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you for the introduction. The journey I'll share with you tonight will cover 11 years and 2 treatments. I'm now 63. I've been married for 35 years. I'm retired, and we have no children. So some key dates and events. In August of 2010, I was 52, and as part of an annual physical, my PSA test came back at 2.7, which was just over the threshold of 2.0. They did a biopsy, which showed Gleason 6 in 2 cores, and it covered 50% of those cores. In January of 2011, I did an MRI, and it didn't align with the biopsies, and that resulted in needing to do some additional biopsies. In May of 2011, I had a focal ablation treatment at Princess Margaret, something that's still offered. And with the focal treatment, you're put under sedation and placed in the MRI, and a laser instrument is positioned in your rectum, similar to a biopsy. The needle of the laser is guided with the MRI, and small areas of the prostate are burned with the laser. 7 years later, in April of 2018, my PSA was 3.14, the first time it went over 3. 2 years later, in December, I retired. In May of 2020, my PSA came back at 6.9. The MRI showed no clinically significant cancer. In June of 2020, I had a biopsy, and here I had 1 core of Gleason 7 at 10% and 3 cores of Gleason 6 at 20%. In December of 2020, I had a HIFU treatment. It's a day surgery under spinal sedation, and it lasts about 45 minutes. Similar to the focal ablation, but it uses an ultrasound instrument, which is placed in the rectum. 2 beams of ultrasound are focused on small areas of the prostate to heat and kill tissue. Now, some of the details of my journey. In 2010, I was a couple of months into a new job that I was enjoying and working long hours. After learning the PSA tests and starting some research, I was most influenced by the book called Invasion of the Prostate Snatchers. It was written by Ralph Bloom, a US patient, and his urologist, Dr. Mark Schultz. And in alternating chapters, the book gave me an overview of the options and some of the reasons for going down each path. I explored various treatment options, ranging from surgery to different types of radiation, as well as active surveillance. Through my wife's health benefits, I sent my results to the US for a second opinion. Surgery was recommended. I also had an appointment with Dr. Vesperini, a radiologist at Sunnybrook. I then spoke to a man of my age who had a HIFU treatment, who was referred to me by my brother. The man's father had had prostate cancer surgery, and the younger man felt he wanted to get rid of the cancer as soon as possible, but would not use surgery. His views caused me to reassess my priorities for treatment. There's a website that tracks trials, but at this point, I was not aware of it. My urologist had arranged meetings with doctors and encouraged me to research, but had not mentioned Prostate Canada support for the Toronto branch. So I felt that I was doing my research with not a lot of direction. In the fall of 2010, I was able to sit in on the science update at a prostate cancer fundraiser meeting at the Royal York. Dr. Trachtenberg from Princess Margaret was one of the speakers, and he talked about his focal ablation trial at Princess Margaret. I met with him to explore the option further. My spouse attended all the meetings with me. The focal ablation trial required the MRI to confirm the biopsy results. Additional biopsies were needed to qualify for me for the trial. And my MRIs then and even today do not show all the cancer locations found in my biopsies. With my diagnosis of low-risk cancer, my focus in 2010 was on accepting some risk of leaving part of the gland untreated and following the least invasive option available. Focal ablation was a step beyond active surveillance, but it only treated the area of the gland where the 50% cores were located. I was back at work in a week and riding a bike shortly after. From 2011 to 2018, my lifestyle was not impacted by the biopsies or the focal ablation treatment. My PSA was stable at around 2.5. My work was going well. My prostate health was just something in the background involving a periodic test and a discussion with my doctor. Our sex life was active and positive. My mood was positive. We had active holidays and I was getting regular exercise. I remained in the active surveillance group at Princess Margaret with Dr. Kulkarni. My PSA started to rise steadily in 2018, climbing past 3 and reaching 6.9 in May of 2020. In 2019, we started making plans for my retirement. I had an annual medical in October. Other than the rising PSA, the other tests were clear. We booked a cycling trip for February of 2020 in Vietnam. I'd had 3 PSA tests in early 2020, with each result going higher. Before we left for Vietnam, my father had been in and out of hospital. He passed away on the day we landed back in Canada at the end of February. We were also in the last phase of a home renovation. The plan was to move back into our house at the end of June 2020. Despite all these life events, I was not overly concerned with the changes in my PSA level. My frame of reference was that it was still slow growing, there was time to do more tests, and that I still qualified for all the treatment options, and my health was otherwise great. In June 2020, I became aware of PCS Toronto and started watching their online videos. A biopsy test that month confirmed one core of Gleason 7 with 10% of the core involved and 3 other cores of Gleason 6. Although the volumes were small, the presence of Gleason 7, along with my PSA level, placed me in an increased risk group. I was told that treatment should be planned within a reasonable time. The Decisions book by John McHugh was recommended at a PCS group call. I found it somewhat similar to the Prostate Snatchers book, but from the perspective of someone who had reached the end of active surveillance and wanted to select a treatment. I read the Decisions book as I was gathering information from surgeons and radiologists at PMH, as well as meeting with the Maple HIFU clinic, my family doctor, PCS members who had HIFU, and a few medical websites. The Decisions book was giving me a structure and rationale for comparing treatment options. By the end of August, I'd been turned down by the PMH focal ablation clinic and the Maple HIFU because the cancer was on both sides of the gland and the prostate was enlarged. I signed on for robotic surgery at Princess Margaret with the surgery scheduled for November. At my age of 62, I didn't want to have radiation. Since I was retired, I could afford the healing time for surgery by not having to rush back to work. I was comfortable with my decision and followed the advice of the PCS group that once you've done your decision, you've done your research and made a decision, do not go back and challenge the decision. However, in September of 2020, Dr. Barkin gave a HIFU presentation at the PCS Awareness Night. He works for the Can-Am clinic and uses a different type of HIFU machine than the Maple HIFU. HIFU is not covered by OHIP and would cost me $20,500 and could cost others up to $25,000. My case was not straightforward for HIFU. Dr. Barkin suggested a TURP to address the extra swelling resulting from having to treat both sides of the prostate. The TURP would also reduce the size of the gland and provide tissue that could be tested for cancer. TURP is a day procedure under sedation and involves removing some tissue from around the urethra to improve urine flow. One of my concerns with HIFU was about the options for future treatment. I understand that approximately 30% of all prostate cancer patients eventually need further treatment. Some surgeons will not operate on radiation or HIFU patients, but Dr. Barkin felt that both radiation and surgery will be available if needed. In December of 2020, I had the HIFU treatment at the Can-Am clinic in downtown Toronto. It was a 45-minute treatment in the morning, and like the TURP, it used a spinal anesthetic. I was home at 8 p.m. The main discomfort I had was from the catheter. It was left in for about 8 days. The healing progressed on schedule, with my activities limited for about 6 weeks. No shoveling, no lifting. I used incontinence pads for a few days before and after the catheter was removed to address some small leaking. I have used no pads and have had no incontinence issues since that point. I was back riding an exercise bike by February. The HIFU follow-up involves waiting 3 months for a first PSA test with ongoing quarterly PSAs to see where the new PSA baseline would be. Although this is still early days, my outlook is positive. I am back to living my life in this next stage, retirement post-COVID, and making the most of each day. I've had no incontinence issues and our sex life is good. We're currently booked for a 2-month driving and camping trip to Vancouver Island starting in early August. Some concluding thoughts. In 2010, as a newly diagnosed prostate cancer patient, it took some time to understand my options and my diagnosis. I recall an early comment that active surveillance would be okay, but I would require a treatment within 10 years. The second opinion in 2010 laid out surgery as the gold standard. In 2010, urologists were recognizing that there was overtreatment of prostate cancer. I was seeing a full range of treatment options. I opted for the focal ablation treatment and feel that had I not been accepted into the trial, I would have participated in active surveillance to monitor the changes in my PSA. But I had low risk Gleason 6 and did not have a family history of prostate or other cancer. For newly diagnosed patients, it will seem off-putting that the answers change with new information in this journey. Somewhat like we've learned about health during COVID. It will take patience to absorb and understand the options that come with more testing and treatment information. I was fortunate that the cancer was found at an early stage and my general health was very good. I've benefited by participating in the PCS Toronto Zoom calls. Listening to the stories and responses of others gave me some perspective on my journey and more confidence to ask questions to my doctor and better understand what he was recommending. Thanks for listening to my journey.
Thank you so much, Jeff. You've reiterated the importance of once you decide on a treatment, don't look back. You've also reiterated the importance of researching and reading up on treatments that you're considering, which is really important. We all hope that you enjoy the trip to Vancouver Island and that it goes well. Now we get to our fifth panelist, Ian. What we should know about Ian, well, he enjoys playing, coaching, and watching hockey. He's coached for years and was on the board for SDGHA for 8 to 9 years. Oh, in case you don't know what the SDGHA is, it's the Sudbury District Girls Hockey Association. He still plays, and the time he spends with the guys is always a laugh, whether he wins or loses. Ian enjoys the outdoors and working, puttering around the family cottage on Manitoulin Island, as there is much to accomplish and good feeling when completed. And he enjoys being with family and friends. Included in family and friends is the family dog. He's been married for 33 years, has 2 children, 1 granddaughter, and 6 nieces and nephews. That's Ian in a nutshell. Ian, if you could please unmute yourself and turn your video on. Welcome, Ian from Sudbury.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ian.
Thanks for the introduction, Ari. Based on the previous speakers, I'm certainly the rookie here. Thanks for your presentations, guys, and good luck. My name's Ian Perry. I'm 58 years old, and I'm from Sudbury, Ontario. Since the age of 30, I've always had a yearly physical with my family physician. He never felt the need for a PSA blood test, but every year he did the rectal exam. Okay. In 2019, he retired. Excuse me. And shortly after I had a medical with a new family doctor, we made the arrangements ahead of time. With the new doctor, he wanted the benchmark for my physical health and blood test, and he had a PSA test done. The test showed my PSA was at 6. He had nothing to compare it to, and he called me and said, "Don't be overly concerned," but he wanted to do another test. The second test, probably about 2 months later, resulted in a PSA of 10. I was then referred to a urologist in Sudbury, and he did the physical exam and then sent me for a biopsy. The biopsy came back negative. However, there was one quadrant in the prostate that was inconclusive. They take 4 samples of each quadrant. The second biopsy was performed in February of 2020 with the same results. So what a coincidence. In July 28th, a year ago today, 2020, the urologist in Sudbury had a phone consultation with me and said I was cancer-free. He said he could not explain why the PSA was at 10. And he said if I wanted a second opinion, he could refer me to Toronto. I asked him why my PSA is at 10. I said, can you explain that? And he said, no. So I said, Princess Margaret, here I come. I was contacted by Dr. Peerless's office of Princess Margaret, or the University Hospital Network, and was scheduled for an MRI in late September of 2021. My wife and I drove down and back the same day. Approximately 2 weeks later, we had a phone consultation and follow-up. The MRI showed a small lesion about 1.5 centimeters to 2 centimeters on my prostate. Dr. Peerless then scheduled a fusion biopsy for late October. And again, my wife and I drove down and back in one day. Same thing, 2 weeks later, we had a phone consultation to review the results. And at that date, the results confirmed cancer. At that point, the doctor didn't give me a Gleason number. I wouldn't have really known what it was. I didn't do a lot of Google searching. I spoke to my new physician, who I knew personally, and he kept me updated what was going on. So I didn't want to be a Google doctor. He didn't give me the Gleason number. He said, basically on a scale of 1 to 10, he said it's about a 7, 7.5, 10 being the worst. He recommended surgery, and he said for me to think about it for a few weeks. The surgery was available in Sudbury, or I could choose to stay with Dr. Peerless in Toronto. Dr. Peerless does the robotic assisted surgery, and that's not available in Sudbury. He said this isn't an emergency, but he would like a decision soon. I was quite impressed with Dr. Peerless. I felt he had empathy to the situation. He took as much time and listened to my questions and all my issues. And when we were talking on the phone back in November, we made our decision then. I didn't want any cancer inside me, so we decided to get the surgery done. I asked him to put me on a cancellation list, and at that time, he had actually mentioned to me about the prostate cancer support group and the peer mentor group. In Sudbury, same as what the other guys have to do, it's typical that the MRI and CAT scan was performed, and and the scans, all the results were negative. And I guess that's typical. Everybody seems to have the same thing before they go for surgery, the CAT scan and the MRI. So this would have been December, late November, December of 2020. And after a couple of rescheduled surgery dates due to COVID, I was confirmed for my surgery on January 15th, 2021. We just had to make hotel reservations at the hospital. UHN provided a list of hospitals nearby. We had to arrive a day early because I had to go. We went down Wednesday night. I had to go for blood tests and COVID testing Thursday morning. My surgery was Friday morning. That was the schedule. So yes, for Friday morning, yes. On this trip, my brother and my sister-in-law accompanied my wife and I just for support. It was actually like a mini 3-day vacation. On the Friday the 15th, the surgery was done, and I stayed in the hospital for the one night. The next morning, I woke up hungry as a bear and ready to go. They gave me instructions for the catheter, and we drove home later that day. I had the catheter in for about 2 weeks, and we made arrangements with the urologist in Sudbury to have it removed, and that was removed on January 28th. After it was removed, I wore a pad for approximately a month. I had basically no incontinence. Everything was well. I had one accident after I went snowshoeing for about 4 or 5 hours, and my back was sore, and I took a muscle relaxant, and I didn't wear a pad to bed that night, and that's when it happened. And that's when we had one of our Zoom meetings, and the girl had told us not to use the diapers as a pad. She said, you have to try to train your bladder. So I did, and I had an oopsie that night, but that was the only one accident. So I felt pretty good about that. So in March, I had my first post-surgery PSA blood test, and it showed that my PSA level was 0.008. However, pathology found a 1 millimeter trace of cancer in the lymph node, which was removed during surgery. I'm not exactly sure on this, but I believe during surgery they removed and tested 14 lymph nodes. The MRI back in December detected nothing in the lymph node. My second PSA test was in June, and it was still at 0.008. During the phone consultation with Dr. Peerless, I asked him about the involvement with the lymph node, and he explained that the lymph node was adjacent to the prostate and was removed during surgery. So basically, in closing, he was very pleased with where my PSA is level at, and he encouraged me to stay healthy and active. My next PSA test is scheduled for September, and as most of you guys, the anxiety, of course, for the waiting and the testing is something I'm going to have to get used to. Some of you guys seem to have it under control, which is great. And physically, I feel great. I was playing hockey and skiing 7 weeks after the operation, and I've been typically energetic, and I'm more aware of my daily diet, alcohol intake, and overall health. I've lost about 6 pounds since this started, and it's the mental side I find I need to work on. So I do appreciate these meetings. I take a lot out of it. I'm learning a lot. I'm doing some reading on the side. And my peer mentor, who's part of this group, supported me, when I felt like talking. And basically, that's it. Like I said, I'm a rookie here, and that's my short story. So thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I just want to make a quick comment, if I can identify you and Bob, who was our first speaker. One of the positive sides of COVID is that our meetings for our support group here in Toronto have gone to Zoom because we can't meet in person. And had we not been able to go on Zoom, or had we not gone on Zoom, which we wouldn't have met you, and we wouldn't have met Bob. So you know what? There are some real positives to this. And so we're very happy that you were able to participate with us. And that's just great. Thanks for your story.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Well, you've heard from 5 fellows. Just a minute till I just let you see my face. Jeez. You've heard from 5 fellows, each of whom has chosen a different treatment. However, not only do we need to attend to our physical needs with a prostate cancer diagnosis, but also we have to manage our emotional needs. Our final panelist is Thomas, who's going to talk about the emotional journey he's been taking since his diagnosis 10 years ago. But first, a little about Tom beyond prostate cancer. Tom holds a BSc in biology, biochemistry, and an MBA. And for those of us who get confused by letters, that would be a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Business Administration, 2 areas of life I know next to nothing about. He's worked for 20 years in aerospace engineering, more ignorance on my part. So Tom is a man of science, logic, facts, and methods of problem solving first and foremost. And he puts his skills of science, logic, facts, and methods of problem solving to good use, as he is an avid sailor, skiing's coming, an avid sailor having started when he was 14, and a downhill and cross-country skier and hiker in the winter, with snowshoes or not. He enjoys bike riding, and he enjoys going for long walks. And as a diversion, he is currently building houses. So in addition to all that other stuff, he's a house builder. I'm tired just sharing his many interests, and I have to wonder how he has had time even to think about his emotional journey. But now we're going to find out how that has unfolded for him. And I'm happy to welcome Tom to our panel. So Tom, if you will unmute and turn on your video, we look forward to your story.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for the introduction. So as Ron said, I've used science and my background in that stuff to help me understand this disease. That didn't help me at the very beginning, though. I would remember being alone in my driveway on a telephone call with my wife, who had the prostate biopsy faxed to her because a complication wouldn't allow it to come to me. My wife is talking to me on the phone, and she doesn't understand all the things that are being discussed. And she's asking for clarification on a number of those ones. And yet I'm in that car in my driveway, and I'm feeling totally alone. I'm all by myself. I am unbelievably angry. You know, how could this happen to me? It just, you know, I led a healthy life. We ate remarkably well. And here we are, you know, I'm 56 years old, and I'm looking at this. I just, you know, had a very hard time believing it. Shortly after that time, I met with a number of specialists, both at the UHN, and at Princess Margaret. And a good friend of mine suggested that I get a referral to a doctor at Sunnybrook. During that period of time, the appointments were stretching off into forever. And, you know, I'm now undergoing the frustration level. This is taking a long time to do. And it is, you know, don't they realize that I have cancer? My surgery happened at Sunnybrook in November of 2011. And after that surgery, you know, there's the business of having a catheter and being at home and not being able to lift anything. And my family, my wife and my daughter and my son, are going out of the way to try and help me. And I'm resisting that because, you know, don't you know I'm okay? And don't you know I can do this? And it was so, I didn't want to be treated differently, and yet I was being treated differently. Shortly after the surgery, one of the things that hit you first and foremost was this impending mortality. The sword of Damocles is hanging over your head, and there's really nothing you can do about that. And it's constantly with you. It's you every moment you're awake. This thing is not foremost in your head, but it's right there doing everything you're working on. My method of dealing with that was to go and become as most knowledgeable about this disease and the prospects for treatments that I could become. I scoured the internet, was reading journals from Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, and other journals that I deemed to be reputable, like ones from the NIH in the United States and in Europe. So it goes back to my BSc in biology and biochemistry. I was able to read these journals with all the technical jargon and all the information that was in that. And it was like going home. So it was very empowering for me. And it helped me understand more of what was going on with my life, which led me to the second point. After my surgery, I was put on 3 years of ADT. And my doctor said, well, it's the Michael Bola study that we're looking for a cure here. And so one of the first things I did was I got that study from Lancet and I read it. And I looked at the protocol and the participants, and participants were huge, 2,600 people. But none of them referred to me. They were all older. They all had radiation and not surgery, and they didn't have lymph positive. I went back to see my doctor because I see him every 3 months. And I said, you know, the Michael Bola study was this. And I explained what it was and how it was different from what was happening to me. And that became a crucial point in my relationship with that doctor, because he said to me, he said, "You read the Bola study?" And I said, "Of course." And he said, "Did you get it from PubMed?" And I said, "No, I got it from Lancet." And he said, "You understand it?" And I said, "Of course." And so he said, "Oh, you're right. It doesn't apply to you. However, this other study, which is for prostatectomy, node positive, and all the things that you're talking about is for you." And he gave me the name of that study. And I said, "Great, I'll get it." He said, "The only problem with it is N is only 109 instead of 2,600. So that changed my relationship with my doctor, and brought on this whole issue of advocacy and how you have to have advocacy to be able to manage your disease. And it stems from being knowledgeable, being able to talk to the doctors in their language, and having constructive discussions and conversations with them. So strongly to the point I was referred to a radiation oncologist. And at first I saw the fellow and we spoke for about 45 minutes. And he said, "Well, I got the doctor now." And the doctor took about 10 minutes to come back. And he came back with 3 journals in his hand. He said, "This one and this one and this one, and we talk about this one, and we don't want to do this one. And you're right, this is the benefits don't outweigh the risks, specifically in your case." And so we spoke for another 45 minutes. And at the end of that conversation, that doctor went up to his desk, got his business card, turned it over, wrote his cell phone number on the back, and said, "You call me anytime, any questions you have." And that was the relationship that I had with that doctor. One of the things that helped me in my journey was I have a lot of knowledge and I have a lot of experience. And I would go to the PCCN meetings at the time, and I quickly got diverted to the Warriors group. And I got a lot of benefit by being able to discuss one-on-one or with a group my experiences, my knowledge, and the discussions that took place with that group to help those gentlemen, and sometimes their partners, to find a way forward with their treatment. That gave me a sense of giving back and a sense of helping. My daughter just recently said, "You know, Dad, I'm really proud of the way that you've managed to look at and have all those doctors work for you. All these doctors, many of them are specialists, and they focus solely on their specialty." And she said, "Dad, you know, you've been able to have not only those people, but your family doctor to go and balance that. So you have a holistic approach to your treatment, not just a specialist here or a specialist there." And I encourage every person with this disease to expand your base of healthcare professionals that you're working with, so you don't have just one working on that. In August of 2020, I had a choice to change my treatment plan, and I was given an opportunity to use abiraterone or enzalutamide or apalutamide, or go with chemotherapy. And I chose the chemotherapy route. And as a result of which, I was working with on a construction site with some of my subs, and I had to say to these guys,
Tom,
yes?
can I interrupt you for a second? Some members are not able to hear you, so if you could speak a little louder, that may be
No
helpful.
problem. No
Thanks.
problem.
Thank
Okay.
you.
In August, I chose to go on chemotherapy, and I had to step off of that job, and I had to tell all these people why. I didn't want to tell them because I didn't want to be viewed as different or special or outside, or I just wanted to be treated like me. But when I told these guys that I had to leave, every one of them said, "You need to do what you need to do for yourself, and we're really sorry." And didn't 3 of them, the key guys I worked with, call me up in the middle of my chemotherapy treatment just to find out how they're doing, and to tell me that, we're looking forward to you getting back and getting into this thing. So Bob and Solomon and Tony and Jeff and Ian all talked about the support groups. I wouldn't be anywhere without the support of my wife, my daughter, and my son, and close friends. And now I realize that the support group goes to other people. Let them know they're not going to treat you differently. They're not going to let it be, wow, this guy's got cancer, we have to treat him with kid gloves. They were there for my support. These guys acknowledge the support. They acknowledge that they need to be knowledgeable in advocacy, and I can't stress that more. So I think that closes out my story for now. It continues, but with help of everybody and with the health team that I've put together, I expect to be doing this for a lot longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the lightning talk and expressing how important the emotional aspects of the prostate cancer journey are, and also for enlightening the audience to how important support groups have been to your personal journey. Thanks again. I'd like to turn things over to Keith, who will explain to us how to transfer our written questions to the chat box, remembering to identify the person to whom the question is directed, or if it's a question for everyone, AKA all the panelists. Keith, could you please carry on?
Yeah, so hopefully you've been making a note of your questions as the speakers were speaking, so you probably have them all set. If you could send them put your questions in the chat box in the format, say question for Tom or question for Ian, and then type out your question, then I will make sure that Ari and Ron get them, and they will call on you in turn as your questions come in. So if you can just write down the name of the person you are addressing the question to and your question, and your name will be tagged with it, so I'll get that and they will know who's asking the question and to whom the question should be directed.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks a lot. And now, just for a brief interlude while you're sending your questions to Keith in the chat box, we'd like to call forward one of our board of director members of Prostate Cancer Toronto, who's going to talk about his position and involvement on the board of Prostate Cancer Support PCS Canada. Winston, could you please unmute yourself and talk to the group?
This is all about movement towards an autonomous network of support groups across Canada. That's how I see it anyway. Why I see it this way and why I think this is necessary, I could only pull from examples in this region. Support groups, from my experience, are formed in isolation. You have the more robust ones are formed in urban centers where there are hospitals, and they result from collaborations between specialists at the hospitals and a few very passionate prostate cancer survivors. Then you have those that are formed in the more rural areas, and it results from a very passionate prostate cancer survivor who's decided to just give back. And these are a bit less robust, and they can fade in and fade out. Most of the groups, they follow the core sort of delivery, that is, they offer advice, but they do things in different ways. And if I were to pull from what happens in this region, you have the Toronto group, which has a very unique activity whereby they visit hospital clinics and they meet men there and they talk to men. As far as I know, this is not done in the rest of Canada. Then you have the Brampton group, which has a special relationship with car rallies. They go to where the men are, and then they have these free PSA sort of tests done, and they return the results to the men. And then you have the Waterloo group, which is a bit more activist. The point I'm making here is that we all have different emphases in our groups. And it's because of this difference that we can learn from each other. And this is where a network starts, the idea of a network starts to become very attractive. And even though this idea was very attractive, it was never really spontaneously done in any sort of real way by group leaders. The first steps towards networking were done by national groups who decided to take the support groups under their wing. The history of this is very long, but I'll just talk about the most recent history of PCC, Prostate Cancer Canada, who decided to take the Canadian support groups under their wing, with the exception of the British Columbia support groups, which is very important because I'm going to return to that very shortly. The results were mixed. The collaboration support groups with national groups provided quite a few benefits in that we got promotional materials from them. We did joint fundraising with them. And the only opportunities that we had to really mix and talk and exchange ideas that were initiated by the national groups were the conferences. Also, the culture was different. The national groups were into more research and funding, and they didn't demonstrate any appetite for the type of grassroots support group activity that we are involved in. So it was mixed results, okay? Meanwhile, the BC group by itself decided that they're going to move towards an autonomous network of support groups under a foundation which they call the Prostate Cancer Foundation of British Columbia. And they have successfully done this for at least 5 years, in very impressive fashion. If you were to talk to any of the leaders of the BC support groups, they're very comfortable with this sort of system. Now we move to what sort of what precipitated current condition. About 1.5 years ago, Prostate Cancer Canada folded into the Cancer Society, Canada Cancer Society. And the emphasis on prostate cancer was de-emphasized because of this, because the society is more of a general cancer society, and it left a bit of a vacuum. And the BC support groups under the foundation decided that, well, here was an opportunity for them to extend their influence beyond BC and create a national system or network of support groups. And that's where we are at now. As an initial sort of base for this group, they have got a website with a directory of all support groups in Canada. And they're towards building a calendar such that every activity by every support group will be in this calendar on this website. They also have, as their operating arm, an initiative called Prostate Cancer Support Canada, which has a council. And it's through the council that I got more acquainted with the board. And they decided to invite me to be part of that board. The Prostate Cancer Support Canada has a very simple proposition. That is, they're the back house for any need that any support group has across Canada. It's as simple as that. No strings are attached. A recognition that a lot of the support groups have developed in a very independent fashion and with a lot of pride in what they do. And it's a respect for their independence. And if they were to be any sort of relationship, it would be an initiative from the support group and nothing imposed from the top. An interesting aspect of this too is the participation of women in the leadership role, which brings in a lot of activity that involves support to partners of men diagnosed with prostate cancer. And as you know, the saying, if a man gets diagnosed with prostate cancer, it's almost as if his partner does too. As someone who's the first member from the East, it was a goodwill gesture. It was saying that, look, we are extending our arms out to the East now, and we're bringing in somebody from the East on the board. Finally, as a member of the board, I can only say that I'm there because, one, I think that the movement towards an autonomous network of support groups across Canada could only increase the advice, the amount of advice that we give to prostate cancer survivors, and increase the amount of awareness of prostate cancer issues. So I think it's going to be good in the long run. I'm there to also acquaint them a bit more with the Ontario environment, given that there's this geographical distance between Ontario and BC. And hopefully my marketing background is going to help them in terms of their relationships with various support groups. We are in the early stages. It's looking promising. With a little bit of patience, a little bit of time, I think it's going to happen. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Winston. And a special thank you from all of us for accepting a position on the board of the Umbrella Group. I know that one of our attendees tonight is in Vancouver, so he would be particularly interested in hearing what you had to say from the Ontario perspective. We all wish you very well as you move forward with your initiatives that will support prostate cancer across Canada.
We have more than one, Ron, from Vancouver.
Well, at least one, so that's good. That's fine. That's good.
Len and Bob and Barry.
Okay. That's good. However many there are, that's great. We welcome them all. But I did notice that there was at least one person. But now it's time to share the questions that have been posted. I'm looking at the time on the screen, and I know that some people have to leave by 9 o'clock. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of the questions that have been posted. We'll deal with those first couple, and then we want to do some wrapping up and some tying together things and make some comments, and then we'll stay after, and we hope the panelists, as many as possible, can stay. So if there are questions that pertain to them, that they'll be able to respond. And for anyone else whose question hasn't been answered, we hope that you'll be able to stick around. Okay, so we have the first one, and Ari is going to look after that.
So I think our first question, just bear with me for 1 sec, was a question for Ian. So right. Ian, if you can unmute yourself and turn on your video, maybe. The question was, how is your post-op ED function?
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Post erectile dysfunction, I still have it. It's I did talk to Dr. Peerless about that in March, and he's optimistic it's going to come back. How it's not. They saved 100% of the nerve bundles on one side and 90% on the other. And I'm getting blood flow. I'm getting swelling. I'm not getting like normal erections yet. And that's one of my only issue. Well, it's one of my issues, yeah, right now.
Okay, thank you. The second question is for Bob Tuck. So Bob, if you can unmute and turn on your video, the question put to you is, how common is it for Casodex to actually cause an increase in PSA?
I'm not sure. Okay, all I just know is I was in my research, whatever. I was an option when I talked to the when I talked to my oncologist about it. She said, "Yeah, it does happen." I don't think she gave me a percentage, but she said it does happen. So she said, well, "Let's try it." And so we took the Casodex off, and it did work. So I don't have a percentage, Ron.
Okay, thank you. Let's excuse me, because we're right at the end of our time. So Ari, if we can just skip along and we'll come back to the questions, but I think it's really important that we share some of the takeaways that the panelists have for us tonight. We invited the panelists to submit any takeaways, any thoughts they have that they want you to go away with, that are important to them and that they think can be important to other people. So we're going to start with Ari, who's going to share some takeaways from Jeff.
Yes, so Jeff feels, these are Jeff's points. Follow the guidelines and get your first PSA test at age 45 or 50. Establish a baseline and monitor how it changes with your doctor. Second point, we now have many treatment options. Take the time to understand the pros and cons of each. Ask lots of questions and take notes of your doctor's meetings. Third takeaway, learn from our COVID experience how your body reacts within a range of expectations. By staying healthy, you are better prepared to enjoy each day and respond to your treatment.
Thank you,
Yep.
Ari. From Solomon, these were his takeaways. He says, ensure that you're comfortable with your doctor because you really are going through this journey together. His second point is connect with people with a similar diagnosis and discuss information, possible new treatments, so you can properly advocate for yourself with your doctors. And third, he reminds us that every human being is different. Feedback given by the doctors, for example, how long will a particular treatment be effective, etc. That feedback varies from doctor to doctor, and any thoughts you receive from your doctors may not necessarily apply to you. Ari?
Okay, from Ian, first takeaway, perhaps for new members, to have hope with a diagnosis and try to educate yourself with facts from people who have been through it. Second takeaway, stay positive. I know it's difficult at sometimes. Third, I would like some facts about self-help, health diets, do's and don'ts. I'm sure smoking is a don't. What about a glass of wine or two?
So there's something for us to think about, yeah. And I'd like to share from Thomas. Thomas suggests the first thing that he'd like us to take away and think about is the power of a strong support group. With it, the strong support group, things are just better. The power of advocacy. By being strong in your convictions and the knowledge of your disease, you can create positive outcomes. And third, cast your net wide when dealing with your healthcare providers. The specialists tend to focus on their specialty. You need a strong, balanced team behind you to navigate this journey. I'd like to jump down, if I may, Ari, because of time, say that for me, the biggest takeaway is the gratitude I feel for each of the panelists who tonight have shared their story with us. I would ask that everybody, for one moment, would you unmute yourselves? And let's show our appreciation to all 6 gentlemen who shared their stories with us. Thank you very much. Now, if you will mute yourselves again, please. Ari, go ahead.
Okay, so now we're going back into the questioning, Ron?
No, we're not, Ari. We're going to tell the group about how we're expressing our appreciation.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
First of all, for a night like tonight, I don't know how many of you realize, but there's a lot of work that goes on in the background and a lot of people that were involved in that work. And although he might get mad at me, I'm very happy that we had Ron participating tonight. He does a tremendous amount of work for this group. A lot of times it goes unacknowledged because he hides in the background, but Ron, this evening wouldn't have been possible without Ron's help. I also am going to single out a few more. I want to thank Winston for helping secure some of the speakers. I think his efforts were greatly appreciated. I want to thank the parties in the background that helped editing the scripts, such as Jerry Garshin and John Schoenfeld. Thank you so much. And for the 6 panelists, we want to express our appreciation more tangibly. You'll be receiving an email tomorrow with an e-gift certificate from Chapters. Some of you have expressed an interest in reading, so I think you can put it to very good use. And thank you again for participating tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And so for those of you who have to leave tonight, at this time, excuse me, we thank you for joining us. We do appreciate your support. We appreciate your encouragement, and we appreciate that you join us for our Zoom meetings. Our next one, of course, will be next Tuesday evening for our regular peer support group meeting. I do hope that you found tonight to be of benefit to you, to hear from real live people who have gone through prostate cancer journeys and who continue to do that. So for those of you leaving us now, thank you for being with us. For those of you who can stay with us, we're going to continue with the questions. Now, whose turn is it? I think it's yours, Ari.
My turn, huh? So we have a question that's been brought up that would relate to Solomon and to Thomas. It's a question about a warrior's journey. Is there a mindset that you adopt in managing your journey other than being prepared with questions for the care team? Not sure how to really describe how I would see it different from those of us at the other end of the diagnosis. Could you comment on that, Thomas and Solomon? Please unmute yourself.
Okay, I could get started. I can't seem to get my video going, but that's okay. You know, I mean, basically, you know, I've attended a few of the warrior meetings, and there was one especially last night that was, you know, there were some tough things to hear. And there was a guy that hadn't been there in a while, and he updated us on his story. And, you know, you could just see he had a different perspective on life, and he enjoyed every day. Things were a little bit more black and white. And that's what I'm trying to do. I don't know, you know, where things will go. I'm very hopeful. I'm very positive, especially after I connected with people like me that are going through the same thing. So I think just part of the journey is being as positive as possible, enjoying the moments, enjoying your life, taking your time to, you know, really smell the roses, connect with your kids, if you have kids, and, you know, do the things that you enjoy doing, and continue to believe that there will be progress and within prostate cancer, especially metastatic prostate cancer.
I reiterate those points too, Solomon. I think that we must remain hopeful. I mean, you know, my disease is throughout my thoracic lymph system, and now with spots on the pleura of where my lungs sit. And you know, I have conversations with my doctor about where do we go from here. I remain asymptomatic. I have no issues associated with it. People don't know that I have a disease. I think that science and technology is moving forward at a great rate. And I believe that at some point that will be there to help us, even if we've been given an expiration date that we don't agree with. I think that the only way to do this is to remain positive and to live each life, each day like it's, you know, it's a special one, and to glean from what you can to make it as best for you and your friends and your family and your loved ones as you can. So.
Good, thank you.
Ron, can I make a suggestion? Maybe ask all the panelists to turn their sound and video on, so they don't need to go on and off, on and off.
Okay.
Right.
So if all the panelists could just turn your video and your sound on,
Yeah, and I'm jumping down now, Ari. We'll
Go
come
ahead.
back in a moment, but just to involve some people, this is for Tony and Solomon, and so I'll ask you to respond in that order, if you will. We'll start with Tony, and then Solomon, if you can respond after. The question is regarding genetic testing and whether or not you have had it, and if so, why, and if not, why not? So, Tony, can you start?
So in terms of genetic testing, I've done some at through Sunnybrook Hospital. They were negative. So far, they were negative. So for now, I'm still on the same path. But I recognize that genetic testing is something that's important. One of the things I'll say is it's not something I've gotten too much feedback from my care team about. I think it's more something that I've been learning more about through forums like these, which is interesting. And it goes back to the whole thing again of advocacy on your behalf and knowledge and, just participating in things like this.
I thought you were asleep.
Because you can then bring the information back to the care team. Thanks.
Yeah, what I would say is actually it's a timely question because I did have genetic testing done about 2 months ago. It was particularly, it was focused really if I had this BRCA gene or not. And if I did, turned out I didn't, but if I did, there would be some more, treatment or a treatment option that I could look at. Anyway, so that's, certain people have it, maybe it's, I'm not sure, 20%, 25%, but I didn't have it, but I did look at that option. And I've already had the genetic testing done.
Thank
Can I add a point?
Yes, go ahead.
So I had genetic testing done for 2 purposes. The first one was to see if there was an anomaly in the gene structure, which would make myself available to new gene therapy that is available to us. That turns out not to be the case. The second one is to look at the germline and to find out if there's an inherited abnormality in my gene structure, which may impact both my son and my daughter. Happy to say that the gene germline tests came back as negative, no anomalies found. So my disease is a local aberration, deleterious for my disease.
Very good. Thank you.
Can I add one thing there, Ron?
Yes,
So-
and then carry on because it's your
no
turn
problem.
next.
So I just wanted to correct one thing, and I think Bob Allen, sorry, said that genetic testing is down to a low price of $200 now. I just want to make everybody aware that if somebody under 50 in the family has been diagnosed with cancer, that genetic testing is free for the extended family, because I've had it in my family the way that Tom was just describing it. And unfortunately, 2 of my 3 sons have the same gene mutation that I have, that my father had, that runs right through the family. So I just wanted to make that known that it could be free. You have to inquire. The next question is basically a question again for Tom. The question is, you had chemotherapy, and the group is wondering if there was a reason that chemotherapy became a choice, because it's not really a treatment that everybody in the group hears about, and there's some curiosity as to how chemotherapy became the option.
Happy to discuss that. So last August, when the PSMA PET scan showed that I had spots on the pleura, and I said earlier, the pleura is the lining that your lungs sit in. So it wasn't on my lung, but it was very close to it. At that time, I was eligible for androgen receptor advanced therapy, ARAT. And that was offered to me as being abiraterone with prednisone, or one of enzalutamide or apalutamide, or chemotherapy. And so abiraterone with prednisone has a bunch of issues and side effects with it. Enzalutamide or apalutamide have another series of side effects that go with them. I have been on ADT, and ADT is supposed to cause issues with fatigue. I'm happy to say for me, that is not the case. However, in looking at the two drug regimes, fatigue is a huge issue with both of these things. And I really wasn't a big fan of taking prednisone, which you have to take with abiraterone because of the cortisol levels that drop and diminish. It was explained to me that chemotherapy would offer me a window of about 2 years, plus or minus, of sort of a cessation of activities, and I wouldn't be on any drugs other than ADT. I've heard lots of horror stories about chemotherapy, and I have to say, for me, I was extremely lucky. The issues associated with chemotherapy that most people get are nausea or vomiting or diarrhea, or in many cases, extreme fatigue. I said to my wife, I can handle 6 3-week sessions of extreme fatigue if I can go for 2 years without anything. So I chose the chemotherapy. Yes, I got curly hair out of the deal. I lost all my hair. I had a bunch of skin rashes. I had arthralgia, and I felt like my MCL was torn again, but those were chicken shit compared to what normally happens to this. So I thought I came off extremely lucky, and I feel great. And my other thought on this was, I'd rather do chemotherapy at 66 when I'm in great health, in great shape, than doing it at 70 when I might not be in that same state. So hit me now. So that's it.
Very good. Thank you. This next question, I just have to clarify something with Bob from North Bay. Bob, did you say in your talk that you continue to go for PSA testing?
Yes, I go every 6 months.
Yes. So
I'm proactive on that.
Yeah. So the question that someone is asking is, why do you continue to do that? Because your surgery was so long ago. Why are you not finished with that? Why is it an ongoing process for you?
Well, okay, because I was aggressive, and I've been told that I have prostate cancer somewhere in my body. It's dormant, and I'd like to think that my healthy diet and exercise and whatever, I'm doing all the things I think I can that are going to keep it quiet. But there's an expectation that at some point it's going to come back, and the only way we have there's nothing to feel by doing DREs. So basically, the only way I know if it's going to come back is with PSA. Now, my oncologist said, "Why don't we just do your PSA once a year?" And I said, "No, I want 2." And she said, "Okay, I'll go with 2." I could go with 6 if I wanted, but basically, if I get every 6 months, I'm going to find out if it's coming back. But I do have prostate cancer in my body. We just don't know where it is. And happily now, touch wood, it's dormant.
Thank you. It appears that maybe I have prostate cancer in my body. I don't know, but I am undetectable and have been. However, I will say that after 19 years, I continue to have my PSA done every 6 months as well. You just never know. And perhaps we need to err on the side of caution, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Ari, I think you have a question that you're going to pose to the entire group. Is that right?
Yeah, there is a question to the entire group. For people that are in the audience, you've heard our panelists and their major takeaways from tonight. We'd be interested in hearing from the audience as to what you have taken away from listening to the 6 panelists tonight. Roberto, you want to go first? I see your mouth starting to warm up.
Yeah. I just want to say how impressed I am with the 6 fellows that gave us their story. All of us have a story, but the 6 stories were very, very inspiring. And one thing that I think joined all these 6 guys to me is the importance of having good support. And we know that. That is why we belong to PCS, Toronto, and other places in Vancouver and so on. But the importance of trusting your family, of trusting yourself, trusting your medical team, trusting your friends, and particularly a group like this one that in difficult times make you always understand that you're never alone, that there is always somebody there to help. So my main takeaway is, although I knew it, it kind of focused it even more how important a group like ours is. And again, I want to thank the 6 guys that spoke. It was very inspiring. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. Who's
Anybody
next?
else?
Something that you got from tonight for, you came with a purpose or some kind of reason, some kind of hope. What do you go away with?
I'm Roy from Vernon, BC here. I just like
Hi,
to make,
Roy. Hi.
Yeah, I'm a 16-year survivor. I had radical, and so listening to the 6 presenters tonight and the other discussions and whatnot just shows how it's so easy for each one of us to have a different. We've got prostate cancer, but for each man, it's a different journey, depending on what stage they were diagnosed, what their age was, lifestyles, everything. And your 6 panelists today really show that. My biggest takeaway and has been, because I'm on BC Support Council, I'm one of the 6 members representing support groups in BC under the foundation, is advocacy. I think it's so critical that we do our homework. We respect our doctors. If we don't like what we feel, then there's a reason. Go find somebody else and get another opinion. The whole idea of speaking up for yourself. You just don't take what people tell you because they said so. That you have to be the one that bears the outcome of this whole journey. And I think the 6 panelists really showed the strength in speaking up for yourself and having a good network around you and on all the things that they touched on. But that's what I want to leave everybody with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. And thanks for visiting us from BC, because we know that it's only 6 o'clock there. You must be really hungry for dinner.
Well, I was a little late signing on because I was in the middle of other things, but I was really glad to be able to still connect. So.
Yeah, we're very happy that you joined us. We have time for one more person. Is there one more person who would be willing to share a takeaway? Okay, then I'm going to turn the tables. Jeff, get ready. Here's the question. You gave us the takeaways you wanted everybody to have from your talk. What are your takeaways from tonight? What is your takeaway? What do you think this experience was about, and what mattered to you, Jeff?
Well, I'm quite certain that my journey is just getting started, and listening to the suggestions of having a support group, being informed, being aware, looking after yourself. I'm going to be prepared for whatever comes down the path.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's a lovely place for us to end when you say being prepared for whatever comes along. And a lot of that has to do with attitude, doesn't it, Jeff?
It certainly
Right?
does. Yeah.
The attitude you have. And when you talk, in the introduction that I was able to share about you, when you're talking about having something to look forward to in your life, not just your prostate cancer, your life, but your trip out west that you're anticipating and looking forward to. That's a really important part of your existence, your current existence and your future, right?
It certainly is. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Okay.
Great. Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. I think maybe we'll ask this long question. It's for Tom. Tom, you said you don't have fatigue, Tom, so that's good, because here's a long question for you to listen to, and then let's hear what you have to say about it. Are you ready, Tom?
I'm ready.
Okay, here it is. Oncology specialists of various kinds can sometimes seem intimidating, especially for those of us without a science background. This can make it more difficult to advocate for ourselves. Do you have any advice on how patients can overcome this to more actively advocate for themselves?
That's a great question. I think that one of the things people should look at is, well, let me go back a bit. I believe that everyone should go to a meeting with their doctor, with someone else with them. COVID makes it a bit difficult. However, when you go to speak to a doctor and you bring your partner with you, as an example, the cancer patient sometimes hears what they want to hear and doesn't get the full benefit of what the doctor is saying. And yet the partner will hear what's actually happening. So one of the things I'd suggest you do is, if you can, take a partner. So two people are in the office listening to the oncologist talk. The second thing is that if you're going to see an oncologist, you're not straight out of first time being diagnosed. So you will have had the opportunity to speak to people like myself or Solomon or Jeff or any one of the people who are here tonight. At the PCS sessions, you can go to these things and tell your story, get feedback from other people and say, if you were in that situation, what would you do? I'm kind of lucky that I, understand this in a very, very in-depth fashion. And I think that it would be very difficult for someone to go advocate when they're just, don't even know what page to turn. So I think that getting advice from other people before your meeting, taking someone with you to the meeting, and having done your homework to the extent you can, and have the conversation with the oncologist, they will open up more questions for you to go and research and look at, and then do your homework so you can go and do that again.
Thank you. Just in moving on to the next thing here, I just want to mention to everyone how wonderful it is to have you with us tonight, because other people might not know that tomorrow you're moving back to Toronto. And this is a big deal. People who have moved their homes from one place to another know what is involved in that. And Tom's going to be doing that tomorrow. So he's got a big day ahead of him. We're very grateful that you were able to spend tonight with us. So thank you for that, Tom.
You're welcome.
There's a question for Ian, and the question, it's just in point form, so I'm just going to try and put things together. Ian, you live in Sudbury. What are the advantages of being in a remote area when you get diagnosed, and what are the disadvantages, and how do you deal with those?
I don't know what the advantages are.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I mean, we do have a system up here in Sudbury that is great for the north, and including me. When my urologist in Sudbury said I was cancer free, but that's when I went to the next stage. And when you're from the north, and Bob from North Bay, if he's still on,
yeah, he is.
He can support this. Is when you grow up here, all your traveling is down south. Your kids' hockey games, your dance, whatever your kids are in. So you kind of get used to the traveling. So running down to Toronto, like my appointments, other than my surgery, was there and back in a day. The only issues you need to worry about or contend with, and with COVID, it's not a big deal because you can pull over into a hotel. But with the COVID things being shut down, getting stuck in a snowstorm or that's the biggest, the only.
Yeah.
So I think if you're from the north, driving from North Bay or Sudbury to Toronto, it's almost in you. It's not a super big inconvenience, you know. The disadvantage, I guess, maybe a little bit is just overthinking it for the ride down. But I love it with my wife and friends. You know?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ian. Do you have anything to add to that, Bob, about the advantages or disadvantages? And I'm not just thinking about in Ontario, but I'm thinking anywhere else. People who live in more rural, remote areas.
Yeah, I encountered an oncologist I was not happy with in Sudbury, and then I ran into an oncologist I was happy with in Sudbury as well. So when I had to use an oncologist, I said to my urologist, I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not happy with the one that I had. I'd like to try another." And he said, "Oh, I know Dr. Bowen, and she saved my life as far as I'm concerned." So I mean, we had good doctors. Like Ian said, an hour and a half drive over is not exciting. I did it for 38 mornings, and you know, and then I proceeded to work. I would not say that that's great, but you know, what the option was to go to Toronto for a week, and I couldn't afford that because I was teaching at the time, and so. I think the advantages of having this stuff in the South is you've got, you know, expertise way beyond, I think, and that's not a knock against Sudbury. Sudbury's got a great, doctors are great there. It's just the resources that like PET scans and all this medical stuff that, you know, is there. And, but as Ian says, it's 3.5 hours, 4 hours. I'm in Toronto. I've done that lots of times.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
Travel's hard.
Yeah. Well, our time has run out. And so, Solomon, you're going to get the last word. Are you unmuted?
Yes, I am.
So here it is. I'm putting the same question to you that I put to Jeff. And that is, you've had this experience tonight with everybody. What are you going to take away from it?
I think the first thing is just a sense of community. It's amazing, you know, that I know you had 50, 60 people here listening to what we had to say. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in this topic. And I think that, you know, humans are social beings and they need to connect. And I think we've done that here tonight. And each time we meet, there's more things that you learn, and it's really an enjoyable experience. But just having everyone around makes it I feel a lot more positive. I'm a positive person in general, but I feel a lot more positive about that. And, you know, I look at Tom and, you know, we went back and forth a couple of months ago, and he sort of set me, I didn't know where I was going in terms of treatment. And, you know, I listened to him, and he's really got a lot of knowledge, and he does his homework, and he really helped me sort of figure out the mapping. And that's about, you know, getting to know the people in the group. And again, that sense of community is what I got away from, to take away from tonight. Thank you very much. By the way, Ron and Ari and everyone who's been involved, you've done a great job. I know it was a lot of work to prepare, and it went off really smoothly. So thank you again so much.
You're very welcome.
I thank you too.
Ari, if you'd like to bring things to a close, because you're the guy who's going to click a button that puts all of us to bed. So go ahead, Ari.
Once again, I want to thank everyone, all 6 panelists. You guys did a great job. And it was very interesting to hear the different stories. And I missed one thank you. And what I was saying, I missed a thank you to our technological expert, Keith, who's been manning the waiting room. He's been doing so much tonight, including the messaging of the questions. Thank you, Keith, for all the hard work and for everybody coming. Really appreciate it. Our next awareness night, I just got to check my calendar. Just bear with me for 1 second. Our next awareness night is going to be in Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. And I believe it's on, yes, it is. It's on September the 30th, 2021 at 7 o'clock. And we will have a very good doctor, Dr. Rajiv Singhal from Michael Garron Hospital is coming to speak to us.
Was that your guy?
And that's the
Exactly.
the former East York General Hospital is
East
now
York
Michael
General,
Garrett.
and he actually was the head of robotics at one time for UHN. He's now the head of surgery at Michael Garron Hospital, who's being plagued with all of the surgical delays caused by COVID-19. So he's very stressed out at the moment. But he'll be here to talk to us. And it should be
Yeah.
interesting.
So you know what, Ari, you thanked everybody, but there's one person who hasn't been thanked. So, well, your name was mentioned, but somebody that I certainly haven't thanked. I just want to thank you for traveling with me as we've put this thing together. I think, as was said, that things went off. You know, it was our first Zoom Awareness Night panel meeting, and it seems to have worked reasonably well. And we thank you for sticking around, all of you, for taking time to stay around afterwards. And so we could field these questions. And we thank everybody for their answers. And now Ari is going to click a button and he's going to say safe home and bye-bye.